Thank you for the introduction, Sharon. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk stewardship economy and the ideas we are implementing or are implemented by the Kwiakah First Nation. For tonight, I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. We'll run around 45 minutes. And afterwards, if there are questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. The group is small enough that we can have a good exchange here. And it's a lot of information. So can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. So what we for tonight is stewardship economy opportunities through living trees and healthy forests. And as Sharon mentioned, I'm the band manager and economic development officer for the Kwiakah First Nation, the smallest band in BC. And since we're talking about the Kwiakah, let me show here a quick, just a sec here. Here we go. Let me talk a little bit about the Kwiakah people. So yes, the Kwiakah are the smallest band in BC. I hate to use the word Indian, but the 19 members is a result of the Kwiakah Indian Band being registered under the Indian Act, and its members are also registered under the Indian Act. The Kwiakah Nation is much larger. We have done anthropology studies, and just going 5 generations back, today, 500 people in the Vancouver Island, North Vancouver Island area could call themselves Kwiakah just based on heritage, and they would be eligible to vote in the Kwiakah Treaty if they chose so. So there's a difference between the Kwiakah Nation and the Kwiakah Indian Band. As the Kwiakah Indian Band, as I said, it's the smallest nation with just 19 members. But historically, the Kwiakah were the largest tribe within the larger Kwiakah Nation. And today the Kwiakah are the Voelker Nation, the Voelker Nation, and the Kwiakah Nation. And historically, the numbers of the Kwiakah were in the hundreds, if not even thousands. But through government decisions and economic pressure, the Kwiakah had to leave their home territory around the 1930s. And never were able to come back until now. So they are claiming back their territory and they are coming back to the territory. The nation is led by Chief Stephen Dick, and Chief Stephen is the hereditary chief of the Kwiakah for over 40 years. He was designated to the position by his grandfather, who held the chief's position before him. And the Kwiakah only have the hereditary system, so they do not have the elected chief and council system under the Indian Act. They never accepted it, and just 2 years back, when the new constitution was developed for the Kwiakah, the whole membership confirmed again that they do not want a elected chief and council and do not be governed by the Indian Act. The core territory of the Kwiakah is on the mainland. In the Phillips Arm and Frederick Arm area. One reserve is in the Vancouver Bay area, and it's reaching over to Stewart Island. So in essence, it's the area on the mainland that follows the Cordero Channel. Unfortunately, when the Kwiakah had to leave their home in the 1930s and move to family in Earlot Bay, or most of them to the Campbell River area to be with family, with Voelker, Voelker, they never got assigned by the Indian agent a residential reserve, a community reserve. So that means the Kwiakah of today are living either as guests on reserves of neighboring nations, or they live like every other resident of Campbell River within the city limits of the city of Campbell River. I mentioned briefly the work on the Constitution that was done in 2023, and in that work, the membership also confirmed that conservation and environmental protection are the guiding principles in the highest law of the Kwiakah, and therefore the chief has a clear mandate by the membership to operate through conservation and environmental protection. We are achieving that through a lot of research and scientific work. So our scientific decision-making process, or the chief's scientific decision-making process, is deeply rooted in culture and tradition, but also in modern science. And the Kwiakah are a treaty nation. We are at stage 5 of the treaty negotiation process. So here's a map of the core territory. The Kwiakah core territory is at the southern tip of the Great Bear Rainforest, and it's around the Phillips Arm area and Frederick Arm area. You see also in this dark green color 2 conservancies within the Kwiakah core territory. That would be the Phillips Estuary Conservancy and the Estero Basin Conservancy. So why are the Kwiakah, or why I'm actually in a position to talk about the stewardship economy in general? Well, there is already a stewardship economy here on the coast, to a certain degree in its infancy. When we talk about the stewardship economy today in this presentation, we actually talk about an improved version of the stewardship economy that is ready to be scaled. And what has Kwiakah done so far is we have established the first phase of the Masinuk Special Forest Management Area. And we have done so in partnership with the government of British Columbia, but also with the forest licensee Interfor, who was willing to surrender their harvest licenses. We have done that through a fair market value business-to-business transaction. So they got paid for surrendering their harvest rights, and they got paid nicely. But what we have achieved is we have created a special forest management area that's very distinct from the other SMFAs that are already in existence in the Great Bear Rainforest, because this new version, we call it 2.0, is enhanced with benefit sharing and co-governance agreements. And this approach is supporting 2 major aspects. That's the economy itself, and it's also facilitating reconciliation. Over the years, Kwiakah was able to build a very strong credibility, and we also have very strong business relationships with our licensees I should not say our licensees, but with licensees working in Kwiakah territory. And we have done that because we have learned very early on that as a small band, you're not getting very far if you drive the course of confrontation. We chose engagement, and engagement got us much further than constantly fighting with multi-million-dollar companies. So that wouldn't have done us any good. And by choosing engagement, we actually were able to create results. What we are known for now is actually the term regenerative forestry. And regenerative forestry is a term Kwiakah has coined, and we have picked that term because we were motivated by regenerative agriculture. And when we learned about regenerative agriculture, we were thinking, man, what's possible over there to distinguish itself from industrial agriculture? Maybe that's possible in the forest. And what would a regenerative forestry concept look like so that it would have the same positive effects the regenerative agriculture has in the area of agriculture? Of course, we couldn't start with growing cover crops or things like that, or what they use in agriculture. So we had, and so we are right now in the process of working with academic institutions to dive deeper into the now academic field of regenerative forestry. What we also have done, as I mentioned before, we chose engagement over confrontation, and therefore we were able to convince the fish farm operator in our territory, who operated there for 30 years without the consent of Kwiakah, to voluntarily actually leave our territory. We made it pretty clear that their activity was not welcome in Kwiakah territory, so we were fish farm opponents, and we were negotiating with them a process where they over time could cease their operation, but could adjust their business plan so that they could leave Phillips Arm as an inlet out of their operational area. And in return, because we were very generous with the terms we had offered, they donated the old fish farm to Kwiakah so that we could repurpose it. And so we kept the cage system, of course, without the nets, because we were not interested in raising fish in there. But we kept the cage system, and we kept all the float houses. And we turned one of the float houses into our base of operations of our forest keepers and marine guardians. Another float house we turned into a accommodation building for our visiting academics. And the third float house or barge, I should say, it's an old feed barge, is, as we speak, here in Campbell River at a construction facility, and it's being turned into a state-of-the-art research center, where we then will be able to offer our academic visitors that they can study regenerative forestry and seaweed cultivation on site. It will be a research center with wet labs, dry labs, cooling storage, computer banks, so everything they need for their research, and it will take out the commute, because otherwise to do research in remote areas, well, either you are in the tent and then you can't do any report writing or things like that in the evening, or you cannot do any analyses, or you have to commute by boat every day, which is in most cases cost prohibitive. Working with academics, we were able to secure a $2.2 million MITEX grant. And MITEX is an organization that is supporting graduate students to achieve their academic designations, their master's degree or their PhD. And these $2.2 million is not money that went to Kwiakah. It is money that we applied for, but it goes directly to the academic institutions like, excuse me, like UBC. We're working with UBC. We're working with University of Victoria, and we're also working with the University of Calgary. Through that collaboration, we're working closely with 6 academic advisors, professors from these universities. And we are getting started to work with 14 grad students, including our own Kwiakah member, who is at the University of Calgary right now and is pursuing his PhD in Indigenous sciences. So we are very proud of him. What we are creating out there actually is in the middle of nowhere, in the most positive sense of the word, is a PhD mill, because we are helping all these students to get to their proper academic designations. The advantage for Kwiakah is that everything these grad students are publishing, Kwiakah is automatically a co-author, and we have co-ownership of all the research results, reports, and things like that, which is very important because, again, it is informing the Kwiakah decision-making process when we're dealing with government and when it comes to the management of our territory. Through that process, we have created a number of new jobs, of course, in stewardship through our forest keepers. But with all the work that was going on over the past 1 and 2 years, there were a number of jobs in construction. Of course, then when you look at the universities that are involved, there are research jobs. And we are still working with environmental service firms that help us to continue with the state-of-the-art research. And also it enabled us to launch a number of Indigenous-owned, Kwiakah-owned startup companies. One would be Kwiakah, which is a platform service provider company for other nations that can join us so that we have the ability to scale all the work we are doing right now. So the question now comes, why do we need a stewardship economy? It's fairly simple right now because our neighbors to the south, they have very strange ideas when it comes to the friendship with Canada. So they are putting enormous academic pressure on us. And then we have the problem that Canada is mostly an extractive economy. So our economy is way too dependent on resources. And unfortunately, extraction is the economic driver. So it's time for us to come up with something new and to steer this heavy ship, which is the extractive economy, into, well, new waters and become a little bit more innovative. Then on the other hand, when you look at the latest provincial budget that came out in March, this is if you ever saw a austerity budget, this is it. It comes with considerable financial constraints. And there are only a few exceptions where money is available. That is for healthcare, social services, and post-secondary education. But there's no money for anything else. We still live with the situation that many indigenous communities face economic inequality. Just a second here. And everybody is aware that we are in a biodiversity and climate emergency crisis. And weirdly enough, conservation and protection is still a cost position on the government's balance sheet. So whenever we have a protected area, it actually costs BC instead of making money with it. And then looking specifically at the forest sector is under enormous pressure and is in desperate need of innovation. And then overall, economic portfolios need to see diversification. So this is very important. The stewardship economy aspect can play a very important role here. I mentioned before that we already have a stewardship economy, and that is based on carbon payments. So the Great Bear Rainforest has an existing carbon project, and a number of remote communities are in a situation where BC, because there is conservation protection efforts by these communities, is rewarding these communities with carbon offsets, and these offsets can be sold on the market. But we are talking about the stewardship economy 2.0, because you cannot have just the dependence on carbon. It has to be much, much broader to be effective. So what does stewardship economy 2.0 mean in the most simple terms? It means there has to be innovation of the provincial forest sector, because it has to be combined. Stewardship economy does not have to be in competition with traditional forestry. It actually should be a complement. So no one should be afraid in the forest sector when they hear us talking about the stewardship economy. And quite honestly, with the licenses in our territory we are talking to and we are negotiating with, they are not afraid of what we are doing. They actually see the value, not only overall for society, but also the value for their industry themselves. The stewardship economy 2.0 has to achieve innovation by adding a major untapped income stream to the forest sector. And also, as I mentioned before, we cannot just rely on carbon. We have to find ways to monetize new ecosystem services. So we have to go beyond carbon. In addition to that, something Kwiakah is working on for the last 3 years is the implementation of new financial mechanisms. And as we speak, Kwiakah is bringing these new financial mechanisms to the attention of the BC Cabinet. What's the core principle of the Stewardship Economy 2.0? It's this formula: designation, atmospheric benefit sharing, and co-governance. So designation, what does it mean? It means to assign a protective or conservation status to a certain area. Could be a park, could be a conservancy, or could be a special forest management area. Then atmospheric benefit sharing agreements, they have to be renewed. They have to be reinvented. And what we are doing right now is negotiating with the BC government new templates for atmospheric benefit sharing agreements that are not only benefiting the Kwiakah Nation, but that we have templates that will benefit every remote community, every indigenous group who is in a position to create and work with the BC government on designations, so that they are the beneficiaries of the atmospheric benefits that are created through the process. And then what's also very important are co-governance agreements. And we have to stop that decisions are being made by centralized entities in Victoria or, God forbid, in Ottawa, by bureaucrats who have never been to an area, but have the power, the sole decision-making power about the welfare of these areas. And that has to stop. And government, at least the provincial government, is now realizing that it is to their benefit to work with the local people on the ground who have the information about the areas to make decisions and to listen to them. And a co-governance agreement, while there's still sovereignty with the Crown, and the last word is always with the Crown, but these the co-governance agreements we have negotiated give substantial power to the local people when it comes to the governance of their own territory. So that is in essence the pathway to the stewardship economy 2.0. So the next question is, or not question, it's actually a fact that the BC forest sector needs innovation. And when we look what happened over the last 100, 120 years, here in BC, when we talk about forestry and the forest economy aspect, we just talk about cutting trees and processing the timber and turn it into lumber. For over 100 years, that's what we do. That's the only way we benefit from the forest. We cut trees, we process it in the mill. And that worked very well, yeah, for the first half of the last century, and maybe even until the 1980s and 1990s. But the good times are over. And the simple formula, cutting trees, processing trees, is no longer working. And this is the major problem the forest sector has. And as one of the main drivers of the economy in BC and job creator, that ability is also going away. And even if the forest sector, the licensees would get everything from government they wish for, the times where they create job after job and are the sole economic driver are just over, because innovation is taking place in that sector, but in the wrong way. Innovation means here automation, and automation means less jobs. So even best case scenario, every year there will be job losses in the forest sector if we don't make changes. So we have to learn that the forest can give us way more benefits than we are using right now. And we have overused that one benefit, trees, that the forest is giving us, and we have to rethink. So there is an imbalance. So what's the solution? That's diversification. The forest sector needs to see diversification, and we can achieve that by adding a third pillar to the economy, forest economy, and that is stewardship. So that means we benefit from the forest by cutting trees like we have before. We still do processing, but we also are getting paid for not cutting trees. And that sounds maybe a little bit counterintuitive. However, through diversification, this is actually an investment approach. You diversify your portfolio just to hedge your bets against losses in one area, and then you create profits in other areas. So you get peace of mind. What that could mean is if in some areas through market fluctuations or stumpage going in the wrong direction, you actually through your typical operation cutting trees, you incur a loss, but you might have secured a secure income stream through, let's say, carbon or other eco-services. And now that more and more indigenous groups are actually replacing the non-indigenous traditional license holders, this is becoming even more important, so that indigenous license holders having harvest rights are actually encouraged and can afford to have less environmentally less negative, to avoid the negative impact, yeah, of current forest practices like, well, clear cutting. And we will not go away from clear cutting for quite a while, because industry is still holding on to that kind of approach and forest practice. But if you can afford to have a softer touch, then indigenous groups who also want to be the steward of the land will be encouraged and can afford to have this softer touch. So what we have done from Kwiakah to create a microcosmos where you can test all these ideas I'm talking about here, we have created a pilot project. And in May of 2024, we have established the phase 1 of the Masinuk Special Forest Management Area. And when you look here at this map, these two areas, the green areas with the lines in here and here, this is the area of the Masinuk Special Forest Management Area. It's an area of 7,700 hectares. And through the creation of this SMFA, we were able to retire 25,000 cubic meters of AAC. And this AAC is not now transferred somewhere else. So in essence, Kwiakah is saying, well, we don't want to have logging here, so make it a problem for somebody else elsewhere. No, these 25,000 cubic meters have been retired. This is creating additionality, meaning now we can use these 25,000 cubic meters and create new carbon offsets. And this is the income stream to start with in the pilot project, where we are creating additional income, where we don't depend on cutting trees. We are getting paid by keeping these trees alive. And through regenerative forestry practices, we are improving the health of the forest and therefore actually create additional carbon. And there's also ways right now to increase the number of carbon offsets through the research we are doing, because most of the carbon actually is sequestered through the soil, not through the actual tree. So there's a ratio to 30% to 70%. 70% of the carbon sequestration is the soil itself. 30% is the tree, and the tree bringing carbon into the soil. But the soil itself, yeah, is our major carbon sequestration tool. And we're working with Dr. Susanne Simard from the University of British Columbia to bring the scientific evidence for this. So what we're working on right now is phase 2 of the pilot project, and that is the expansion of the SMFA. And we want to add block 5 of TFL 39. That would be this area. This is a large area. These are around 46,000 hectares and 45,000 hectares. And this small area here, this is a tiny little sliver of TFL 47 that is still in Kwiakah core territory. And we're negotiating with the licensee here as well to have that included in this expanded version of the Masinuk SMFA. And we will also, or we're negotiating right now, to have these yellowish little blobs here, which have a weird provincial status. That's not really defined what it is set aside for and what the designation is. So we are negotiating to have them just included in this phase 2 of the special forest management area. These yellow plots are around 1,000 hectares. So overall, what we're looking at is an expansion of 47,000 hectares and with an additional retirement of 39,000 cubic meters of the AAC. So that is the pilot project Kwiakah is conducting right now. And what we're trying to achieve here is proof of concept. We want to show everyone through open source, open books, that it is possible to have an economic driver by creating a healthy forest environment that does not require cutting trees for profit. So now we have to look at the opportunities beyond the pilot. That would be phase 3 of the process, and that is scaling the stewardship economy 2.0 model in the Great Bear Rainforest and beyond. And we achieve that through a much larger diversification of the forest sector, and also through the products we are creating by having healthy forests and the eco services. We actually are in the process of creating an expanded export market. And I'm not talking about exporting logs. We are talking about export of other products, where BC actually could become a leader in that space. In order to achieve that of course, we need provincial support to remove policy and operational barriers. And I will talk about that a little bit later on. But that will be necessary to, scale this concept beyond the Kwiakah pilot. What is the opportunity exactly? Well, when we're looking at the Great Bear Rainforest, there is already an existing carbon project. 100% of the carbon in the Great Bear Rainforest is verified. And what we now can do with the additional projects, like Kwiakah's pilot project, we piggyback on this existing carbon project and create new carbon offsets we can benefit from. However, we are in a situation, since the hard work for setting up this carbon project is already done, it's so much cheaper to have these additional smaller carbon projects that lay on top of the existing one. So in essence, to expand the concept within the existing boundaries of the Great Bear Rainforest is a no-brainer because all the hard work is already done when it comes to carbon projects. I mentioned before that Kwiakah is more than willing to be open source, open book. We want to be observed by other remote communities, other indigenous groups, First Nations, that they see what we are doing, how we are doing it, and that they use our example, can study it, and then adapt it, hopefully, to their own conditions in their own territories. This will be very important to build a network that we can scale accordingly. However, what we can also achieve through that is the moment we have certainty about what areas are under protection, what areas are conservation areas, where we create this healthy forest environment, where we have regeneration, recruitment, and every little bit of old growth there has to be in these areas. But there's also very valuable second growth out there, ecologically valuable, 80, 100 years old, where it will be very easy through regenerative forestry principles to achieve old growth characteristics in these second growth stands very, very quickly, and therefore create new eco-services like biodiversity or the cooling effect a forest has. But by creating certainty for conservation areas, we automatically create certainty for operational areas. And in all our conversations with the industry, with the license holders, they told us, this is what we want, this is what we need. We need to have certainty. It doesn't help us if we have a huge area on the license, if we have an enormous annual allowable cut, but then when it comes down to business, when we want to go in and log, we can't for a number of reasons. So who cares that we have a license and have harvest rights when it doesn't lead to cutting permits? So what industry would prefer is much smaller license areas, but at least have then certainty that here's our sandbox where we can operate. And this will eventually lead to a healthy shrinking of the industry, where we just are at a natural level, where we are in a situation where we clearly know this is the amount of timber our forests can produce safely, and this is the amount of, well, industry we need to achieve that. And with that certainty aspect, there are open lines of communication. This is what industry needs to hear. This is the concept they are very, very interested in. And we hope that actually jointly industry and indigenous groups can work with government and create these certainty aspects. And then, of course, we have to look, as I mentioned before, to go beyond carbon when we talk about the stewardship economy and create revenue. We need to create markets for new eco-service credits. And the first one that comes to mind is biodiversity. And then the next one in line is the cooling effect of the forest. And there are being studies done right now by the University of Eberswalde in Germany, where they work with private land forest owners to have them compensated for the fact that they do not cut their trees. And then the universities go in and measure what is the impact, the cooling effect on the forest area itself, but also adjacent. And they're making really good progress there. And another eco-service clearly would be water retention of a healthy forest system. And if you have a healthy forest system with proper water retention capabilities, you don't have to be that afraid anymore of wildfires. So there's a lot of things we can do. Kwiakah right now is working with a Australian foundation who has chosen Kwiakah to become the incubator pilot project incubator for North America for the development of these new eco-service markets. So it's a quite exciting project. But not everything is rosy, and we encounter problems, that's for sure. So let's talk briefly here about the barriers, in particular to scaling a stewardship economy 2.0, where we go beyond Kwiakah territory. And that is right now, we don't have a clear provincial pathway how to scale a stewardship economy model. Government right now is borderline paralyzed because of tariffs and the austerity budget, it's very difficult to get their attention for new and progressive ideas. Then you have to look at the amount of work that needs to be done, a TFL conversion and the voluntary surrender, and the creation of a special forest management area or other designations requires always one-off approvals. It's a huge amount of work. Provincial mandates are required and ministerial mandates are required, which you might get a chance once a year, to get the attention for that and have then high-level bureaucrats get the mandate to work on something like this. Then when you look at the flow of money, right now there's zero capital support for tenure buybacks unless they are linked to logging. And most likely this year, not even that is going to happen. But if it's not cutting trees, the government will not put up any money. So in the case of Kwiakah, that we actually were in a position to afford all these transactions, and I'm talking here millions of dollars, we don't have that kind of money. We were lucky that organizations like Nature United, the BC Parks Foundation, Nature Conservancy of Canada, and the Make Way Charitable Society was working with Kwiakah over these past years to raise the required funds. We would never have been able to do that on our own. And then right now, to get started with creating revenue from healthy forests, if you don't want to cut trees, it is carbon. We don't have the new eco-service credits yet. And to create new carbon projects, we have to work with the provincial government, and they have very limited capacity to do that. Right now, it takes 3 years and more just to get a new carbon project off the ground. Other barriers are in the area of policy and market misalignment. Right now, there are no policy or budget integrations for a stewardship economy. All the talk right now during the election right now, the discussion about carbon tax, have one, have none, have a modified version, all that creates uncertainty and is destabilizing the carbon markets. I said it before, conservation is still seen as a cost, not as a provincial asset. And interestingly enough, the provincial government isn't earning any revenue from carbon projects. They actually are buyers of offsets just to keep the BC market going. And as a result, the offsets are horribly undervalued. But as a government or from us, from a taxpayer perspective, carbon offsets don't do us any good because the provincial government is not getting any money for it. On the contrary, they are paying. And then we have the BC carbon framework, which clearly lacks alignment with much more advanced and progressive carbon markets globally. And that is reflected in pricing. And then we have operational challenges. Not an issue this year, but in general, if we have AAC reductions, which environmentalists might welcome, but it's bad for carbon markets because if the AAC is reduced just by degree, by a government decision, and nothing else happens, then you don't have any additionality. So therefore, you're not creating, while the AAC is reduced, you're not creating any new carbon offsets. Current timber supply reviews don't reflect ecosystem or carbon values at all. It's just about timber and what could be cut. And protective designations are very limited, and they don't allow for the activities that are required to bring a emaciated tree plantation back to life and help the forest heal. You're not getting the licenses to do that. You would need a cutting permit to do important work, like, for example, thinning of very densely planted third growth stands that need thinning, otherwise the whole stand will not survive. And this is the biggest bummer. Special forest management areas here in BC are right not recognized under Canada's 30 by 30 conservation goals. While they are clearly as good, if not better, than a conservancy or a park, they don't count towards that goal, which makes it very difficult for other First Nations to raise the funds through philanthropic donations, because many of these philanthropic organizations are saying, well, we want to support activities that will be recognized under Canada's 30 by 30 goals. And then here's another interesting aspect. If the land use is not industrial, meaning logging, then you're not getting a road permit. But if you don't have road permit, you can't do the work that's required to keep the new forest that now needs some help to heal in shape. And also, it hinders the transactions of surrendering the harvest rights by a licensee, because they are held then still, when it comes to the liabilities, to this industrial standard, and this is very costly, so that actually a surrender, even at market value, doesn't make sense to them, because that means they would have to deal with road liabilities right now at this very moment, and otherwise they would be able to wait taking care of these liabilities 50, 60 years, because usually you don't have to deal with liabilities until you're actually operating in this area. And then you take care of certain liabilities, but you don't have to take care of liabilities when you're not operating. This is unfortunately something that the BC government is tolerating right now. But on the other hand, if they would really enforce that licensees have to take care of the liabilities right away, every licensee in this province would be bankrupt tomorrow. So this is very weird. Again, putting sufficient area under protection and deal with this liability issue would also take care of that, and would lessen the burden on current licensees when it comes to their balance sheets and liabilities they are carrying. So now comes the question, what will be required to create success? And that will take political and industrial will. They have to have the motivation to innovate the forest sector, and they have to accept that the stewardship economy has to be included as additional pillar in the whole economy orbit. We have to create this separate runway to create new revenue and to achieve a diversification of the forest sector. And what is next? Well, the ball is in the government's court. We have shown them what can be done. We have made presentations to them. We hope we got a little bit of their attention. Right now, we are trying to line up meetings with individual ministers and their core staff to reinforce the message and to bring it up again. But what government must do right now is be supportive for the expansion of the SMFA, so that we have this proof of concept, a clear business case. They have to work on finalizing these new templates for the carbon agreements, so that there is an incentive for other remote communities to go down that path. And they have to make protection designations also available to other communities in a simplified way. Just to create the SMFA as is right now, Kwiakah was working on it for over 3 years. It drained all our resources, and it was a lot of work. And then overall, the government has to show that there is support for this Stewardship Economy 2.0 concept. Okay, that was the PowerPoint presentation. A lot of information. It was 45 minutes. I hope everyone survived this flood of information.